comments. I'm sure everybody's busy taking notes. I just have one comment. The Reason to Believe, the first video, that for me was a direct descendant of the Hilltop commercial. Was anybody I mean, it really was. It was just, Hilltop would have been one of the most famous commercials of the 20th century that I'd like to teach the world to sing. I'm always amazed the way within big companies, no matter what the media, no matter what the time, the idea that the culture of the company comes through all the time is extraordinary.
Yeah, so I think that's about back when Hilltop was on, was just after or during the Vietnam War. And I guess what we've been trying to do now is really look at what the social tensions are at the moment. And I think there's a general feeling, not just in Ireland, but across the world, in terms of people are uncertain of their future. There's a lot of friction out there, and really it's about tapping into that kind of macro tension that we feel.
Okay, sorry, I'm sorry to cut you off because I don't want to interfere with the questions, but because we're now going to have the questions. But before that, I'm going to ask Emma Walls to come up, marketing director of Glenisk, probably one of the most successful Irish brand stories of the last decade. Emma, unfortunately, doesn't have the same budgets as any of the other three speakers, so she's here to represent you. But I'd now like to ask Shane and Julie and Carole-Ann to come up as well. Maybe if I just ask Emma to give us a brief overview on your use of digital and social media.
Sure. I suppose we, initially when we looked at digital, we took the view that we were the brand that didn't have the budgets for the big above-the-line activity, and it was almost like, we're going digital out of necessity in the same way we looked at packaging as a medium out of necessity, and that sometimes can present a sort of a negative spin on it. But actually there's a real opportunity for smaller brands with digital, an opportunity that's not always available to the multinationals, actually. So we would have seen that we can speak with a much more credible, authentic voice. And I think the challenge for social media and for digital is that it's so time-consuming for small brands.
I think it was Carole-Ann made that point. Don't underestimate the time.
It's a huge amount of time, and I think people then get put off because they say, look, our team is, if our budgets are small, also our team is small and we don't have the time to do it. But actually, the investment in time that you make, whether it's out of necessity or because you see an opportunity for it, is repaid to you enormously, because suddenly you have this very personal, immediate connection with consumers, and those consumers become brand ambassadors for you, and so it suddenly becomes scalable. So if you have, it's really simple things. All of our customer service is now online. It's all public. It's on social media. Anytime anybody has a complaint, it's there on Twitter, and how we deal with it is also public. So there's an opportunity in that. And the idea for a smaller brand that the consumer feels that there's a real person at the other end and they're responding really quickly. So it's not great if you're me or you're Mairead here who's answering tweets at 10 o'clock at night, but if those tweets are from a mother who wants to know what she can feed her baby and she gets an answer back at 3 minutes past 10, she's a customer for life and she's going to talk to her peers. And it's quite laborious and it's quite intensive in terms of setting that up, but actually the long-term rewards for the brand are enormous. And I think in our category, John, all of our competitors, our big competitors, are multinationals, Danone's, Muller's, Yoplait, and they can't speak with that local, social, engaged voice that we can. So it's a massive opportunity.
But I think the message from all speakers is it's not you have no choice but to be in this space at the moment. So have we got any questions? And thanks very much, Emma, for that insight into the Irish market. Yeah.
I was just going to ask...
Maxine, sorry. Can't see it with the lights.
I was just going to ask Emma, do you guys have somebody full-time now on digital social media?
Hi, Maxine. I think it's hard to find somebody full-time in Glenisk who's full-time in marketing. My title is marketing director, but I'm involved in all sorts of different aspects of the business. We have a really small team and everybody's spread really thin. So while we don't have a full-time dedicated resource to digital, we prioritise it. So if something comes in on digital, we respond to it very quickly. I think the other great thing about it is that, when you don't have the budgets to do TV or a lot of TV, digital is something that I think people say, you can fail fast at, but you can move on from. So you can fail fast and fail cheap. And that's another reason why I would say it's critical for us. So no, we would love to have somebody full-time dedicated. We don't, but we prioritise it.
Thanks. Anyone else? There? Oh. Are you asking a question or fanning yourself? Up the top.
If you work in the assumption that on the 70s, the big brand consumer owners dominated the airspace in the marketplace, and then they had a shift benefiting the retailers in the 80s and 90s. Most recently, with the development of social media, which is completely new to me, working in the assumption that whichever forum is going to dominate or develop that level of expertise will win the next round of the battle between the global brand owners or consumer brand owners versus the big supermarkets. Is that a fair comment to make, that whoever masters that level of social media expertise wins the next stage?
Well, let's ask our three global people here. Shane, would you like to start?
Yeah, I guess it's just important to realise that whether you're a local or a global brand now, the reality is you're working in a global sphere. And whether you're a retailer brand or an FMCG brand or a service, you need to be very, very clear on what your positioning is, what you stand for, what your tone of voice is, particularly in digital anyway, when it comes to talking with consumers and conversing. So it's very hard to I guess to categorize the risk or indeed the it's important to know your place, and therefore you're in that space that is just global, and you need to be very consistent in what your approach is and what your positioning is.
Yeah, I'd agree, and I think back to kind of the point I was making around ultimately, we're owners of a brand, but actually our entire audience will define you, and it's the same goes for customers, for retailers. If you're not clear on your brand values, if you're not clear on your tone of voice, if you're not clear on what's the core value of your company or your brand that you want to portray, and therefore that you want your audience to then take and run with on your behalf, that it has a great risk to any brand or to any customer. And as it happens, we were only talking before you guys came in around kind of retailers here in Ireland at the moment, and particularly on Tesco. And I've seen kind of quite the Tesco are seeing quite an issue, as I'm sure you all know, over the last couple of months, from a footfall perspective. And we were kind of saying, well, you know what, I don't know what Tesco stands for anymore. I don't know what their value is. If you ask me what super value stands for, yeah, I could pretty much, I can define that. And I think they've kind of lost their way. But in terms of how they're talking about themselves, what's their value, what's their message, the role of digital could play such a significant role for them to kind of rectify that. And I think at the moment they're really in danger of kind of not being able to kind of return from that decline.
Yeah, and I mean, I would agree. I think ultimately we're in a world where the consumer is in control, and they're incredibly fickle, and I don't think we have a choice but to play with them but in a very authentic way. And I think it's not good enough anymore just to sell services and products. You have to mean something to consumers and create a connection, and I think have a purpose as well. I mean, Glenisk is one brand I've been looking at recently, which I think is a really good brand, where it really stands for something and consumers recognise that. And I think you've been you've worked really well with your consumers to establish that purpose and what you stand for, and consumers are responding.
Yeah, I think last Friday we just saw how fickle consumers are, if I can refer to consumers as the public. But in relation to, I think it was Julie's comment, can I put in a good word for Tesco? I mean, they are actually quite helpful to a lot of you out there. And they've been very helpful. I mean, quite apart from being big buyers of Irish food, they're actually quite helpful for the small Irish companies. And I know there is a cooperation between Borbia and Tesco at the moment. I'm nothing to do with it, so I don't know any of the details. But I think they have been working quite hard, and maybe that's a route they're going to answer the question that you've just posed about a renewed brand image for them. So, any more questions? Yep. This front row. Hang on, so everybody here.
Sorry. My name's Clarke, from Dawn Farms. As global brands, and the way that there is no borders in Twitter, how do you direct people to the correct Twitter handle when you do a big promotion? Do you know, like for example, Heineken? They just go onto Twitter, search Heineken, and they follow Heineken. Yeah. But that's got nothing to do with Heineken Ireland and the campaign you just led. Yep. So do you see that as an issue? And do you have any tips as to direct people to the right handles?
Yep. It's, thank you for that. It is absolutely, it's an issue actually, and it's a very similar issue, I suppose, issue/opportunity for us on Facebook. So globally, Heineken Facebook has around 17.5 million users. From an Irish perspective, we have a couple of 100,000. So the might of that and the benefit of that is if we create content strong enough locally that they will put that on the global page, so we straight away can access 17 million people. The downside is, I suppose, when you do have your tailored content, if they're not putting it up from a central point of view, is absolutely that. So in all our communications, it's communicating, as you say, like the Twitter Irish handle, but you're going to naturally, you will have a lot of people been drawn into that global Facebook page or your global Twitter handle and picking up an awful lot of content that really isn't relevant to them. And that is a really big challenge, and it's a constant battle that I will have in terms of the content that's going up globally, whether we want our Irish consumers to even see it, because actually a lot of the stuff, particularly on Facebook, I would be kind of looking at it half the time going, like, what are they doing? Which you've no control over. So it comes with its benefits. Like, for example, on the Odyssey campaign I showed tonight, they deemed it worthy enough, really, to put on their global page, and they're very strict about what they'll put there. But that brought us to 17 million people straight away, in terms of, accessibility versus an Irish perspective. So it's benefits and definitely downsides, and your communication in, even if it's just print materials, or if all you have is a leaflet, or if all you have is on your pack, being really clear about where you want to drive people to.
Content relevance is, obviously
huge.
Vital. It's like particularly on like social media, where people, if they don't see things that feel are relevant to them, they just dismiss it and filter it. Yeah. And like when I saw McDonald's 2 weeks ago, it's the first time that McDonald's UK joined Twitter. So I just thought, it's obviously is a major issue that brands are dealing with at the moment, trying to get people to the relevant Twitter handles where they actually get engaged. As we're seeing, there's no point having millions of followers if they're not actually engaged with what you're saying.
Yep. Totally agree. Yeah.
I think as well, it depends on what platform you're on. So I think when you think about Instagram, for example, which is pretty much images, so it's probably got a more universal appeal, so it's not quite as important. But when you talk about Twitter, it's very important because it's about conversations and a lot more about storytelling, so it is really important to get local content. And I think from our perspective, we're actually allowing local markets now to create their own kind of Twitter accounts as well as the global, because it's become such an issue and it's the biggest debate that we have. So it is something that we are trying to do.
I think if companies like yourselves didn't do that, Emma would be the clear brand leader in the Irish market in a very short space of time, because you can be much more agile.
Yeah.
And not only is your own content much better, but there's no dissonance from content coming in which is irrelevant. Any other questions? I'm having difficulty seeing the hands, so if the people with the mics have a look down and scan the audience and see, are there any more? If not, I have great pleasure in inviting you to join us for a quick bite and some Heineken as an added incentive. I'd like to announce the winner of the draw for the Bloom tickets, Ivan Hammond of Brennan's Bread. Mm-hmm. He gets the bread. These are here. And I'm conscious that we did start late, and I'm delighted to see such a crowd. Thank you very much for coming. I just want to thank our three speakers again. We've had multiple speakers before, and I've noticed it's not being rude or anything like that, but sometimes, when a speaker is finished, they just kind of switch off. You can see that. And before they start, if somebody else has come on, they're intent on reading their own notes and preparing for what they're going to say. This is the first time I have ever noticed the two speakers who weren't speaking glued intently to what the other speaker was saying. All these speakers were learning from each other.
Looking for tips.
Looking for tips. So I think
Absolutely.
it is testament to how good they were that happened. Could you please give them a big round of applause?